Picture this. You create a beautiful drawing that your family members admire. The next minute, your neighbor comes up in front of everyone and claims that he is the one who came up with the drawing because you possibly could not have done so. You do not have the talent or the intelligence to do so. This is exactly what some racist European men said about some African achievements. They claimed them as their own. So what exactly are those achievements that they claimed? Let's start with the kingdom of Mapungabwe. Mapungabwe, a South African civilization, was home to an advanced culture of people. The kingdom thrived as a sophisticated trading center from around 1200 to 1300 AD. Its highly sophisticated people traded gold and ivory with China, India, as well as Arabia, and the region had a population of more than 5,000 inhabitants. It appears that the Mapungabwe elite lived at the top of Mapungabwe while the rest of the populace lived at the bottom of the hill and in the surrounding area. The people of Mapungabwe were wealthy. They farmed and kept cattle, sheep and goats. Harvests were large and allowed them to trade and store surplus food. Archaeologists found traces of millet, sorghum and cotton in the remains of storage huts. Archaeologists even found a golden rhinoceros when they excavated the area. Considerable quantities of gold were found as well, such as animal figurines. Gold scepters, a bowl considered by some to be a crown, bracelets, bangles, beads, nails, were also uncovered. This was a wealthy kingdom. But a wealthy kingdom built by who? When Europeans found the ruins of Mapungabwe in the 19th century, they could not believe such impressive structures were built by black Africans. They came up with silly theories to somehow explain their presence and confirm racist European beliefs. They claimed that the Phoenicians built Mapungabwe. But this was not true. The kingdom was built by Bantu-speaking peoples, likely the ancestors of the Shona people. It had nothing to do with any Europeans or Phoenicians. Another important fact to know is that the apartheid South African government kept the details of Mapungabwe a secret. They wanted the false narrative that there were no Africans when the whites arrived to prevail. Next, let's talk about malaria. In the 1850s, Sir Richard Burton was told by Somali nomads that mosquitoes transmitted malaria. However, he dismissed this as a superstition. It would not be until 1880 that a French doctor, Charles Louis Alphonse Lauveron, would discover the malaria parasite in Algeria, for which he would win the Nobel Prize. Finally, in 1897, a British man, Ronald Ross, would be credited with discovering that malaria was indeed carried by mosquitoes. But it all started with Somali nomads and the credit ended up being taken by a European. Now, let's go back down south to Great Zimbabwe. This site had been attributed to Europeans, Babylonians, Arabians, Phoenicians, etc. The site is a remarkable achievement of African civilization. These impressive ruins were built in the early 12th century and are the largest stone ruins south of the Sahara. Initially, outsiders were credited with building the structures, but later, it became clear that the Shona people, who resided in the region at the time, were responsible for constructing the marvelously built stone fortification. Great Zimbabwe was the center of a flourishing gold trade that spanned across the Indian Ocean. Early European visitors had difficulty accepting that Africans were responsible for constructing such impressive structures. Portuguese traders in the late 1500s thought the city might be the legendary Queen of Sheba city, or the biblical city of Ophir. The truth remains that this magnificent city was built by the great Shona people. Great Zimbabwe lives on as one of the largest and most culturally important archaeological sites of its kind in Africa. What about the Epha Heads? The Yoruba people of Africa created remarkable art, including the beautiful Epha Heads and brass and terracotta sculptures. In the 10th and 11th centuries, Ife was a prosperous city, revered for its art and cultural significance, particularly its sculptures. The lost wax process was used to create bronze castings. The beauty and skill demonstrated in the sculptures are undeniable and a testament to African ingenuity. Foreigners were likely astounded by the discovery of the Epha sculptures, but many were critical or refused to acknowledge their African origin. One German man, Leo Frobenius, was particularly fascinated by these Yoruba artworks. He first saw one of these artworks in 1910, an artwork he called the Olekun head. He described it thus.
It was a head of marvelous beauty, wonderfully cast in antique bronze, true to life, encrusted with a patina of glorious dark green.
Despite his admiration for these sculptures, Leo Frobenius could not accept that they had been made by Africans. He came up with a ludicrous theory that survivors from the legendary island of Atlantis brought their Greek civilization to Africa, which could be seen in Yoruba art. According to this German man, once upon a time, the race, far superior in strength to the Negro, had been settled here. What a load of bullocks! But unfortunately, many Europeans of that time thought the same. Finally, and there are probably many more that we don't know about, let's take a look at the African practice of inoculation. Evidence suggests that the earliest known instances of inoculation occurred in sub-Saharan Africa and were broadly used in Western and Central Sudan, Ethiopia, and Southern Africa, and this was recorded by Europeans. In his Histoire de l'inoculation de la petite vérole, 1773, French geographer Charles-Marie de la Condamine stated that many West Africans had been practicing smallpox inoculation since time immemorial. Local practices differed widely in inoculation material and sites on the body as well. In fact, one enslaved African taught his master, Cotton Mather, about smallpox inoculation. Eventually, high-ranking English figures embraced inoculation. Inoculation became a cultural technology and European colonists claimed it as their own, twisting the narrative once again in their favor. Attributing African achievements to non-African sources reflected the dark continent stereotype. This discredited Africa's rich cultural and artistic heritage. But the colonizer needed to hang on to these stereotypes because after all, the European countries had convinced their subjects that the reason they were colonizing Africans was to civilize them. So it would not be in good taste to actually admit that the Africans were already a civilized people. That's why they had to credit our achievements to other people. That's why they had to hide our history. But the truth cannot be hidden for too long. We are claiming back all the territory that the enemy stole.